In this lesson, which has to do with the pair passage, we are going to learn how to deal with this kind of passages and ask ourselves what are the best strategies that we can use for getting through these kinds of problems. I know that it is a problem for many of you. I am aware of this. I'm quite aware of this. So let us start out by simply talking about what are analyzing multiple text questions. I'm not talking here about the pair passage here, but what I'm gonna focus on more is, I call it what يا شباب, analyzing multiple text questions, اللي هي the relation questions, the relationship questions at the end of the passage, اللي هي they are like what? Like 4 or 5 questions, okay? So starting from here, okay? Starting from here, like 49 here, that's the relationship questions. Or in other words, I'm gonna call them what يا هاجر? I'm gonna call them, remember? Multiple text questions. These kinds of questions are the ones that you will see at the end of the pair passages, okay? They will ask you about 2 short passages. By the way, the passages, as you can see here in the pair passages, they are not long by any means. They are not long. They are shorter than normal passages, okay? And as you know, I don't have to tell this, they have got what? They have got the same topic in different ways. So let us do, for example, the blurb here. Passage 1 is adapted from Michael Slezak, Space Mining, the Next Gold Rush. Passage 2 is from the editors of New Scientist, Taming the Final Frontier. And most probably, Taming the Final Frontier has to do with what? Has to do with what? With space. So as you can see here, they are about what? They are about, they are addressing the same topic in different what? In different ways, okay? So, whenever you have 2 pair passages like this, we have to tell ourselves this. They are paired for a reason. They address, as we said, a similar topic, but they come at the topic from 2 different what perspectives, 2 different points of view. نادرا لما تبقى written by the same author. لكن most probably 80% they are written by what? 2 different authors or 2 different what? Writers. These questions generally ask you to compare and contrast all the questions that have to do with what يا شباب? Multiple, if you still remember, multiple text questions. They have to do with what? They will ask you about compare and contrast, okay? Compare and contrast what? And when I say compare, see the similarities. When I say contrast, see the differences. Differences of what? Of the purposes of both passages, of the structures, of the points of view. You understand my point? Of the authors, of course. So, what might an analyzing multiple text question look like? Okay, I'm going to show it to you here. Look at this one. And here, I call it what? Relationship questions. And the question here is, what might an analyzing multiple question look like? These are the questions that I can see at the end of each pair passage. Which choice best states the relationship between the 2 passages? Think about it. Which choice best states the relationship between the 2 passages? Number 2, which choice best describes, and this is very important to understand, how author 1 or author of passage number 1 would most likely have reacted to author 2's remarks in a specific place. That specific place, it could be like what? 928 to 30, okay? Within the second passage, or vice versa. You got the point. Remember the question. Which choice best describes how the author of passage number 1 would most likely have reacted? ممكن يكون رد فعله ايه? You got the point. To author 2's remarks. لأي ملحوظة أو أي حاجة قالها the author of passage number 2, you could be provided by what? By specific lines, as I said here. خلاص كده؟ طيب. Based on both passages, both authors would agree with which of the following claims? Okay, These are the most commonly tested questions about what? About, we call them what? Multiple text questions or relationship questions that we're going to see in what يا شباب? That we're going to see يا سهيلة in the what? The pair passages. Something that's common to all of these questions is that, وده الحاجة اللي لازم تعملها, that you need to understand what's going on in both of these passages. And you need to understand the mindset of both authors. ويعني ايه mindset يا شباب؟ المايندسيت بتاع الاثر ده اللي هو الاتيتيود. وهنا الاتيتيود. You got the point, right? طيب. ليه بقى يا شباب؟ عشان we can compare these two things against what each other accurately. نقول هو الauthor of passage number 1's attitude كان عايز ايه والauthor of passage 2 attitude كان عايز ايه عشان نعرف يا شباب نعمل comparing and what contrasting. Okay? So now we have a little bit of an idea of what these sorts of questions are. زي ما قلناهم هنا يا شباب as you can see here. And there are like what? Few more, but they are in the same area, so don't worry about it. Okay? Let us talk now about the overall strategy. ايه هي strategy for approaching multiple text problems or questions. هنعمل ايه يا شباب؟ When you deal with pair passages, first, this is what we have to do. First, read passage number 1. We're going to read this. And by the way, we can apply what we have applied while approaching other single passages. You can go for what? Mister, can I go for hitting the bookends? You still can do this. You don't have even with the pair passages to read the whole thing. So, يبقى أول حاجة يا شباب, we need to read what passage number 1 as you normally would. Then, instead of going into passage 2, answer the question that only relate to passage number 1. يا عمر يا جيار حد يقول لي يا مستر أنا by the way and this is a method too and I cannot overlook. ما أقدرش أقول لك لأ. في ناس بتقول لي إيه يا مستر؟ طب ما أنا أقرأ يا مستر both passages. والله if you could absorb all of this be my guest يا ابني. لو أنت تقدر تستوعب كله ده go ahead. لكن بصراحة يا شباب أنا I don't recommend this. أنا عايز الناس هتشتغل على passage 1 as if they are approaching a single passage. وبعد كده يا شباب we need to what? To answer the question that have to do with what? With passage number 1. ودايما ال questions, how many questions? Who can tell me? Question number 1, it could be what يا شباب? 3 to 4 questions. About what? About passage number what? 1. طيب, why do we do this? One, or we will be more confident and the passage will be fresh in our minds. And if you go straight from reading it to answering the questions about it, then that's the only thing that you will be thinking about. You will never be thinking about anything else. So don't worry when you are dealing with passage number 1. But if you read both passages, and I'm going to tell you the downsides of this method, ايه هي بقى عيوب الطريقة دي؟ When you read both passages together and then try to answer questions about both of them, it is very easy to get طبعا confused. It's very exactly mixed up. Mixed up on what? On the details of what was said in the passage. يا نهار اسود هعرف دي ولا دي ولا دي هيبقى a lot of information. You got the point. Because, you know because of what? Because they are so similar. And because the test will likely try to trick you by putting maybe an answer choice that only relate to one passage. So read the first passage as I said first, and then answer that question and that the questions about passage number 1. طيب وبعد كده يا مستر نعمل ايه؟ You go to passage number 2 here, okay? And then answer the question that relate to passage number 2. And also passage number 2, we're going to have about what? 3 to 4 questions about passage number 2. At this point يا شباب, you have read both passages. خلاص عرفتهم. You have analyzed both. You have answered questions about both. You have got a really good knowledge of both. thanks to all of this good work انت عملت كده a lot of great work, which means that you are reading now only to finally what? Take on the question that relate to both passages اللي هي multiple text questions أو relationship questions, which is usually about what? احنا قلنا كام يا شباب؟ للأسف ممكن يوصلوا لغاية 5 questions. ممكن يوصلوا لغاية كام يا شباب؟ 5 questions. I'm gonna do these questions at the end. يعني I'm gonna do these questions at the end. When I told you before, if the pair passage يا زياد in the exam, if it is difficult, of course you need to postpone it till the end. خليها للآخر. وبالتالي انت you are gonna save the text, the multiple text questions or relationship questions for last. That's for sure. ليه بقى يا مستر؟ Because you want to make sure that you do as much as possible to get yourself familiar with the first 2 passages. Okay? So, what is the overall strategy that you ought to use for multiple text questions? طب اعمل ايه يا مستر عشان انا عايز استراتيجي واضحه يا مستر برضو. Okay? What else could we do with these sorts of questions? Well, it's important يا شباب to talk about finding evidence in multiple text. طب يعني ايه finding evidence يا مستر؟ ما هو زيها زي اي single passage. نعمل ايه يا شباب دلوقتي احنا of course this is something we do on every kind of reading question or questions. We are always trying to find evidence in the passage. So what can we do with these kinds of questions? In the pair passages are very similar to single passages. ده لازم نعترف بيه تماما. احنا we have said this part. They are quite similar. if they are quite similar فاحنا we're gonna use the same strategies. احنا ليه بنفكر ان ال pair passages يا شباب ليها حاجة مختلفة تماما عن other passages. We don't have this at all. انت you don't need to learn a whole new set of strategies مع ال pair passages. You can use the same ones we have been using this the whole time. So for example, you could use what يا شباب؟ hit the book end strategy. يعني ايه hit the book end strategy؟ اجي هنا يا شباب وانا اقول يا مستر particularly if you are running out of time and I'm going to read the introduction here. This is the introduction. And then and I need people to have this kind of sensitivity as well. And then the first sentence in that paragraph, which ends here, it's a whole paragraph. Then we have got another sentence here in the new paragraph. Okay, and then I'll go to the end of the paragraph and I'm going to start from here. Another commercial venture that sprung up in 2012, golden spike of Colorado till what يا شباب till the end. لكن في حاجة بقى في pair passages لازم تعرفوها. Sometimes the pair passages they don't have a real conclusion. يعني هنا مثلا يا شباب in that pair passage we have got a real conclusion. In other passages sometimes we don't have a real conclusion. لازم تعرفوها كده. If you don't have a real conclusion and it is a very long paragraph, what you need to do 2 sentences from the beginning and 2 sentences at the end of of the paragraph. That's what you need to do. The most important thing now يا شباب after we have approached or used this or utilized this strategy يا شباب اللي هي hitting the book ends. نعمل ايه يا شباب؟ We need to pay attention when reading pair passages. نحن نعرف what is the relationship between multiple ideas about the same topic. طيب, this is where multiple texts differ a little bit from single passages. Even though, for the most part يا شباب, we can use the same strategies as we said. في حاجة مهمة جدا while you are reading يا شباب. What we need to do with paired text is make sure that we are paying attention to the relationship about these different ideas. يعني ايه؟ أنا فاهم يا مستر كل ما بقرا حاجة هنا. طبعا أنا I read the first passage وعرفت المين idea هنا. When I start reading the second passage and I need to what يا شباب؟ I need to use my pencil. يعني ايه to use my pencil يا مستر؟ If you read the first paragraph here, you come to say, Mr. Agreement. Mr. Here he used but. Mr. It's a beginning of what? Disagreement. You don't have to write the whole thing. You got the point? Yeah, you need to do this. Somebody will use underlining parts here and they can write a very short note. Somebody will write or draw an asterisk or a star or whatsoever. فانت what you need to tell yourself يا شباب when you are reading through these pair passages, where do authors agree and where do authors disagree? They're very important. Mr. طب ما هي it is not the only relationship. ما في other relationship يا مستر. أنا عايز أقول لكم 90% of the pair passages كلها يا شباب agreement or disagreement. You understand the point? طب إيه هي common phrases مثلا يا شباب؟ phrases لو هنكتبها كده phrases that signal بتقول لنا signal مثلا agreement. It is true that حاجة كده or whatever synonyms. Okay, you can say of course, particularly used by what passage number what? Of course passage number 2. You understand my point, okay? And then phrases that signal يا شباب ايه؟ signal disagreement. Passage number 1, follow the money and you will end up in space. الراجل قال لك كده follow the money and you will end up in space. That's the message from the first of its kind forum conference on mining beyond earth. وبدأ يتكلم على الكونفرنس يا شباب. قال هنا ايه within a few decades these firms may be meeting early demands for precious metals such as platinum and gold and the rare earth elements vital for personal electronics such as Ethereum. And فقال لك the motivation for a deep space travel is shifting from discovery to economics, which has to do with what? With this idea here. The past year has seen a flurry of proposals, a lot of proposals, suggestions, اقتراحات كتير aimed at bringing celestial riches down to earth. نجيب بقى أي حاجة من هناك بقى، نلاقي جولد، نلاقي اللي نلاقيه ونجيبه للأرض. No doubt this will make a few billionaires even wealthier. وساعتها تتساءلي بقى يا أستاذة ميار، يا ترى دي positive ولا negative؟ No doubt this will make a few billionaires even wealthier. والله هي بالنسبة لي أنا يا شباب it could be both. It could be negative or it could be positive. يا ترى يعني does it mean that they are going to ignore the common people, الناس اللي هم poor people ولا لا؟ But we all stand to gain. But we all stand to gain معناها إيه؟ لكن كلنا ربحانين. The mineral bounty and spin of technology could enrich us all. الحدوتة دي كلها اللي هو إيه يا شباب؟ mining space could enrich us all. يعني هيغنينا جميعا right. فلغايه دلوقتي انا كراجل شاطر قوي اقول لنفسي this is يا مستر agreement. لغايه دلوقتي he's agreeing with what? with the author of passage number 1. لكن تيجوا هنا حضراتكم في passage number 2 paragraph number 2 في passage number 2 يبدا يقول ايه يا شباب؟ but. يعني بدا القصيده بايه؟ but. وبط دي يا شباب دي one of the phrases that signal what يا شباب؟ اقول له شكرا. ده بدا ايه؟ يقول اللي عنده بقى disagreement. Okay, but I need to read through. Before the miners start firing up the rockets. By the way, this is ironical. يعني this is ironical. He does mean to be sarcastic here. عايز يبقى ساخر شوية في الموضوع. We should pause for thought. يعني we should consider a lot of things. At first glance, space mining seems to sidestep to avoid most environmental concerns. What are the environmental concerns? And he started to talk about environmental concerns. So he started to talk here negatively about what? About the mining of what? Of space. فهنا أقول إيه يا أستاذ محمد حسين؟ أقول إن ده بدأ يبني to what? To disagree. You got the point, right? Every part that I should start reading in passage number 2, I should what? I should use the compare and contrast strategy, and I should write down. By writing down something like that and something like that, it will make my job easier when dealing with what? With multiple text questions اللي هي ايه يا شباب يا منار؟ relationship questions at the end. عشان كده بنقول ايه يا شباب؟ phrases that signal this agreement could be what? ها مين يفكرني يا شباب؟ قلنا ايه؟ but, it could be yet, it could be however, It could be something like this does come with side effects though, or any similar phrases like this. خلاص يبقى ساعتها تعرفوا ان he started to what? To show his disagreement. You got the point? If you follow this system and apply these strategies, watching out for these traps, then you will be well on your way to being equipped to handle these what? Analyzing multiple text questions. يلا يا ابني.
9 to 17, the author of passage 1 mentions several companies, primary 2.
طيب 9 to 17. الله أكبر الله أعظم. The forum comes hot on the heels. مش عارف ايه لغايه هنا ايه يا ابني ايه لغايه ما قال private asteroid mining firms companies. Planetary Resources of Washington says it will launch its first prospecting telescope in 2 years. While Deep Space Industries of Virginia hopes to harvest metals from asteroids by مش عارف ايه. ايه رأيكم يا شباب في السؤال ده؟ يا أستاذ أحمد حسن you go for what؟ بسمعني صوتك.
Yes.
ها. Take your time.
I think B.
Okay. B. هاجر do you agree ولا لا يا هاجر؟ Provide evidence of the growing interest in space mining. Okay, great. If there are many companies are starting to what? To explore the space, that means what يا عمرو يا صلاح? إن there is a growing interest in space what? In space mining.
The author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effects?
تاني, the author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which of positive effect. لازم نبقى عارفين ان the author of passage 1 he was what? He was writing positively about what? About space mining. Read from 18 to 22 and give me an answer. 18 to 22.
Within a few decades, these firms may be meeting earthly demands for precious metals, such as platinum and gold and the rare earth metal,
Vitals for personal electronics.
personal electronics,
Such as Ethereum. Exactly.
and lanthanum.
Okay. Lanthanum. Within a few decades, these firms may be meeting earthly demands for precious metals. وكأن الناس اللي في الأرض طالبين الحاجات دي. Such as what? Platinum and gold. And the rare earth elements vital for personal electronics such as Ethereum and what? Lanthanum. اللي احنا قريناه دلوقتي أوديه فين يا ابني؟ أوديه فين يا عمرو يا صلاح؟ The author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect? Who can give me an answer? Who can give me an answer? It could yield materials important to what? To Earth's economic. Okay, economy, right? Yield materials means what? Like what? Produce. Materials important to what? To Earth's economy, and I think it was very clear. خدوا بقى عندكم B. بتقول ايه B? It could raise the value of some precious metals on Earth. It wasn't there. It could create unanticipated, unexpected technological innovations. It didn't tell. It could change scientists' understanding of space. It didn't tell.